Coming at you again. It's been a while. I'm here with my good friend Chris. How's it going today, Chris?
Good, Doug. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. Lots going on in the sports world.
Hmm.
The Canadians are, I guess, out of it, right? I mean, that series is done now. Carolina just disposed of the Montreal Canadiens. It was a valiant run. I know we don't talk hockey here very much at Keeping Receipts. We've got some shorts in our library that pertain to hockey, but we don't really discuss it. But here in Canada, that series was it was huge, right? I mean, the Canadians had not made it that far in quite some time. They've got an exciting young team, but unfortunately, not this year. The Stanley Cup will not be hoisted in Montreal this year, but I got a feeling it's going to happen someday in Montreal. But at any rate, we're pivoting over to the NBA, where Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals is to tip off tonight in Oklahoma City. And that has been a back and forth, super entertaining series. Lopsided, some of the games have been, and very, very physical, extremely physical. So the questions that I brought to the table today, and we've got a little bit of a different format in that I didn't prep Chris with the questions that I brought to Keeping Receipts this morning. I think it's a good question. It's kind of open-ended, and it does connect to what's happening in the Western Conference Finals and what has happened prior to the Western Conference Finals in terms of the officiating. So what do you think, Chris? Do you want to get started, or is there anything else you wanted to add before we dive into it?
No. Yeah, you're waiting for your question, and these last minute ones is good. Makes me think, and I can't do my research, so you just got to have a good base of knowledge. And it has been a good playoff run so far. And it's too bad we didn't make videos earlier, because there were some games that was really very contentious. The internet was abuzz, and that's just par for the course for the NBA. I find that playoff drama is all about, it's all around. And in particular in the West, I don't think the East has been as dramatic. I think some of the series have been more straightforward. But in the West, when you could really pick either of the two teams, a lot of times the difference is officiating. And, there's been a lot of chatter in that regard to most of these series in the Western Conference so far.
Yeah, well, I would submit the most of the chatter in the East is from teams imploding rather than the officiating. Right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically that fight in the tunnel between Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. And I don't know if that was much of a fight or anything, but it certainly blew up on social media, as these things tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
And social media, unfortunately, tends to steer the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a story came out of that. But social media is absolutely steering the narrative in the West as well, more towards the officiating, like you've already sort of alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question with regards to that is, is there some substance to the claim that the Spurs are just being steamrolled in the paint, in the key? And if so, why does this keep happening to them? Against Minnesota, fans in social media especially directed their tirades towards what they thought was, lack of foul calls from, I think it was Tony Brothers and his crew in that Minnesota series.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of physicality in that series, just as there is in the Western Conference Finals currently. Wembanyama is just getting pounded in the paint. And there aren't a lot of calls. There really aren't a lot of foul calls. Now, Tony Brothers was moved to the Eastern Conference Finals. His crew was. I don't know if that was by design, and they wanted to, I guess, crush that narrative and move his crew over to the East so that, that would essentially extinguish that whole complaint. But the complaints are still rolling in. The fans are still claiming that the Spurs are getting jobbed and they're just getting the short end of the stick in terms of officials and foul calls in this Western Conference Final series. So what do you think? Is there really substance to that claim? Or is Wembanyama just such a big presence that he's going to draw that attention and he's going to be under the microscope anyway?
I think it's a bunch of different factors that come into play here. Personally, at the beginning of the series, I was thinking that social media was overplaying some of the foul baiting that OKC does, and some of the lack of calls that Wemby gets. Yeah, I thought it was overdone. But as the series has gone on, I have to admit that, in my opinion, it just boils down to playing style. I feel like Mark Daigneault and the Oklahoma City Thunder, that's part of their philosophy, is to get really, really handsy on the perimeter defense, to pick up half court, and really get physical, like grabbing players, preventing them from getting to their spots. And they do it right off the bat, right in the first quarter, to sort of set the tone for the officials. So that, I think, is definitely playing style. And I think it helped Oklahoma City win the title last year. And, it seems to me that people have short memories, that championships teams, they always sort of get the benefit of the call from the referees. When it was Jordan and the Bulls, it was something we got used to, Shaq and Kobe with the Lakers. This is just something that kind of happens with good teams, that they get that reputation and then the refs sort of give them the benefit of the doubt. So on the defensive end, I do think Oklahoma City, that's their playing style. So people are really upset at it, but that's what they go for. And they've been doing it now for 2 or 3 seasons. So people shouldn't be surprised. In terms of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the foul baiting, I understand people's frustration, because it is getting to the point now where he does go to the ground quite a bit, even with no contact.
Yeah.
But, he's a vet and he's now a 2-time MVP. So that goes a little bit towards the craftiness of the game. Most people that have been in a sport for a long time, skill meets craftsmanship, and they develop these little tactics. They sort of understand how the referees are going to call the game. So they act accordingly. And Shai Gilgeous is right in the prime of his career in terms of craftiness. He knows that the refs are watching, and he knows with the volume that he has the ball that he'll get those calls. And for me, it's nothing more egregious than in the regular season when we're watching Luka Doncic or LeBron James do it for the Lakers. I think it's just the difference. The contrast is that the playing styles are very different. And one thing I would argue too is
the playing styles of the two teams,
or the two teams. Yeah. Oklahoma City and San Antonio have very different playing styles. San Antonio sort of plays a more ethical game. They're not picking you up at half court as much. They're kind of getting back on defense and waiting to play you in that half court setting. They're sort of dropping Wembanyama to keep him in the paint, and sort of switching on the perimeter a little bit more, which, it just is a little bit less physical than what Oklahoma City is doing. And then aside from that, as you look at the two MVPs, Wemby is not really a banger of a big guy. He's a perimeter big, kind of after the same mold of Nowitzki. And, that was one of the criticisms with Dirk Nowitzki, is that he didn't really get the calls because he wasn't really banging down low traditionally the way, a lot of bigs would get the call. So I think people kind of need to realize that. But having said that, watching this game or watching this series closely, I definitely do feel that Oklahoma City has maybe taken it too far. That's why the fans are revolting. They don't like the playing style. And, the league conspiracist comes out in me. And I have a feeling that the league really wants to help nourish this rivalry between OKC and San Antonio. I think it's going to be a rivalry for a long time coming. And I have a feeling
Denver, you could probably put Denver into that mix as well.
I would have, but after this year with their first round exit to Minnesota, when Minnesota was really beat up and they didn't really put up as much of a fight as I thought, I think Denver might be in some trouble. But in terms of the future of the league, I think most people would agree that OKC and San Antonio are not going anywhere. They're both so good. They're so young. And I have nothing to point to back this up. This is just my opinion, but I have a feeling that the league wants OKC to get through this year, because I think it's possible if San Antonio beats OKC in this final, this rivalry might have already taken a hit, and OKC might already take a backseat to San Antonio. So I could see.
If last game was any indication, I would say that that's absolutely true.
Right.
They were able to contain SGA extremely well. And if he's only going to score 15 points, that's a win for San Antonio every time.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And, it did. One thing I will say is this series does look like any team that really needs to win does win. So, yeah, who knows how Game 7 is going to go. My thought is that it's going to be a really good Game 7.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be close, and I think it's going to end probably, at the last minutes of the fourth quarter or even in overtime. I think it's going to be that close. And I just have a feeling that Shea's not going to give you two bad games in a row. I mean, this streak he has of 20 plus every game for 130 games, whatever it is. There's a reason he did that. He's that consistent, and I don't see him having a disappointing game again in Game 7. Having said that, I do think that if the referees weren't as generous to OKC, this series might already be over. And I do think that OKC maybe needs that part of the game to be successful. Just because of the playing style, and not to take away from their talent. They're extremely talented and they're extremely deep, but
balanced.
Yeah, they're very balanced. But I'd argue that there may be more. Their real dominance is maybe more on the defensive end, and I think on the offensive end they really rely on the half court scoring of Shea and his ability to do that. It's why I think OKC had a slight edge initially. But just the young talent of the Spurs and the way they can play on both ends of the floor, defense and offense. And in particular, I think Vassell on Shea Gilgeous has really kind of been one of the key matchups. And yeah, I think we're looking at maybe one of the league's elite two-way players with Derek Vassell, even though he's not really getting the benefit of the doubt. Some of the worst calls, I'm thinking of Hartenstein grabbing his hair on one of the drives in Game 2, I believe it was, and not getting called. And some of the ticky-tack fouls that he's getting called while he's on Shea Gilgeous are really sort of disappointing. But having said that, there's definitely no pout in this San Antonio team, which as a basketball fan, that's all I want.
Okay, there's no pout in some regard, but every time they're in front of a microphone and if they're posed with the question about the officiating or the flow of the game, Wembanyama anyway, he seems to be kind of the virtue signaler up there at the mic, saying that they play the more, authentic, clean basketball.
Yes.
Right? They've made comments that sort of point towards that.
Yes.
Not just Wembanyama, but as the leader, he's making those comments, and then the others are sort of following suit,
right?
Which is fine, I suppose. But
I feel like it's a game that has to be played both ways. If Mark Dagnall's going to tell his team, hey, let's get physical from the beginning and let's put the onus on the ref to call these fouls that we're committing almost every possession.
Yeah.
San Antonio's trying to put the ball back in the ref's court at the end of the game by making it as public as possible and trying to call out all of the egregious calls, kind of like what you and I are doing here at Keeping Receipts.
Right.
The more public outcry on a situation, I think the higher the expectation for the referees to do a good job for the next game. So
yeah, hopefully it reinforces the discourse, right? And people just keep talking about it.
That's right.
And then the league has to address it to some extent, right?
Even if they don't address it, if San Antonio is talking about it, if San Antonio is talking about it post game and it's plastered everywhere on social media, I think the referees reffing Game 7 know, okay, if I'm not pretty good with these calls, there will be a huge spotlight. And I don't think the referees want this, Right. And, Doug, one thing I wanted to mention is here at Keeping Receipts, we've talked about social media reports of referees getting suspended and or fined and or fired for their conduct while officiating games. And just want to say from my digging, from my research, that's not substantiated. The NBA itself has not officially released any of these statements saying any official has been fired or dismissed from the playoffs.
Yeah, and there was a rumor that Brothers was going to face some discipline after
Right.
the Minnesota series, but that never
Right.
came to be.
Well, and also James Williams, there was a bunch of stuff about him online.
Yeah.
I think Brett Bernanke was another one that there was rumored to have been fired. And these are all unsubstantiated. It's all just Facebook posts.
Yeah, and even Scott Foster, he never faced suspensions, did he? Foster?
Well, not that we can find officially. We found Facebook and social media posts on it, but in terms of any official reporting, has not been corroborated. So, I do feel like this is just fans posting on Facebook after a game where they're really upset, kind of wishful thinking. They hope that if they put it into the ether that maybe it'll happen. But no, there's no.
The crew hasn't been announced for the finals just yet, but it'll be interesting to see who they put together. It will probably be a crew, obviously, with tenure, right? So
usually the same guys.
Yeah,
Corbin, James Williams, they'll probably be there. Zach Zarba is going to be there. Bill Kennedy would have been there if he wasn't injured. Unfortunately,
Tyler Ford, Ben Taylor,
Scott Foster on the list. Oh, are you reading that Ben Taylor will be part of the finals call?
Well, he's part of a veteran group that will probably be considered.
No, if you've noticed, Ben Taylor has not been the lead official on many games, and that's one of those where I think the league is not including him on some of these big games because Ben Taylor's he's had a little bit of a history. Things haven't gone, especially as a Raptor fan. We definitely don't want to see Ben Taylor as an official in any game we're part of. So,
well, depending on who you're going for, I suppose. But it's going to be a good final. I think the Knicks they'll have, I guess, about a week off, right?
Yes.
Before they head into the final.
Yes.
Sometimes that works out in a team's favor. Sometimes it backfires.
Yes.
But I'm really impressed. You have to be with how the Knicks
absolutely. I think if Mitchell Robinson is injured with this broken finger and he doesn't play, I think that's a big deal for the Knicks. I think they kind of need the combination of Robinson and Cat to be as successful as they have been. But I'll tell you this, Doug, the conspiracy theorist in me thinks that the league desperately would love the Knicks to win a title. So I think this narrative of poor officiating, especially if OKC faces the Knicks, I have a feeling that trend is going to reverse big time because
I could see it.
I think if there is any validity to the league putting its finger on the scale to try and change outcomes for their favor, for their bottom line, this will definitely be one of those instances because a win for the New York Knicks after 72 was the last time they won, 99 was the last time they made it to a final against the Spurs, oddly enough.
Those were the Tim Duncan and Tony Parker days.
Tony Parker wasn't on the team yet. That was
he came later, but Duncan was around.
Yeah, that was Duncan's rookie season, 1999, and he
won.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's because Marcus Camby and Duncan were drafted the year prior, 98, right? Duncan was 1, Camby was 2.
Possibly, yeah. I know. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. You might be right about that. But yeah, that was those two teams were stacked. The Knicks didn't really stand a chance back then. I think they were 7th seed going into the finals.
Yeah, well, Ewing would have been at the tail end of his career at that point, right?
Yeah, still kind of effective. But yeah, they had Ewing, Camby. I think they had Anthony Mason, and that was the Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell run.
Right.
Yes. And so it'll be very interesting. I think let's not forget that for the Emirates Cups, the Knicks beat the Spurs in the finals for the Emirates Cup, and the Spurs played an incredible semifinal game against OKC where they won, I think, by 2 points to win the Emirates West final to represent the West.
Well,
So
this
it's
gives a lot of credibility to that format, right?
yeah,
You got
absolutely.
the two best teams facing off in the Emirates Cup, and then meeting each other in the finals. You can't
Right.
ask for better symmetry than that.
Absolutely. And I think moving forward, it'll make teams really want to put their best foot forward for the Emirates Cup,
For sure.
because this is kind of cool to represent your conference for both things. You know what I mean? And it just kind of shows it how the rest of the league might be in trouble when it comes to San Antonio. I do think if San Antonio wins this year, I don't know what we're going to do, because they're so young. And they still have some players that I haven't even contributed yet that are rookies that might be absolute superstars moving forward.
I know, and to draw a parallel with what we were talking, or what I was mentioning at the beginning of the show, the Montreal Canadiens would be a similar team, right? The NHL, because I mean their entire team is under the age of 25, essentially, right? The
Yeah.
Canadiens and the Spurs are very similar in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
some potential dynasties are starting to form in the major sports, which is kind of cool.
But it kind of leads us into the question I wanted to ask you, Doug. I feel like basketball is a sport where clubhouse dynamic doesn't really play in as much as some of the other sports. And I'll give you an example. We've seen many basketball teams that kind of take the regular season off and they know their championship caliber. And then they just flip a switch come playoffs and no one can beat them. As an example, this year, we saw the Orlando Magic coming into the Eastern playoffs looking absolutely horrible. Their coach Mosley was fired as a result of it. And they went in losing like maybe, I think they lost maybe 5 out of 7 games going into the finals, or going into the playoffs, sorry. One of them to the Raptors that they lost by 50. That was kind of a must-win game for both teams. They were tied in the standings at that point. And then in the first round of the playoffs, Orlando went on to take the Detroit Pistons to Game 7, and they were in control for most of that series. So, clubhouse, the club room dynamic didn't really play there. But I'm noticing in hockey, for instance, a team that will make it to the finals is usually the team that's playing really well coming into the final weeks of the regular season into the playoffs. And so that brings me to my baseball question for you, Doug. Last year the Jays started a little bit slow, and then I think at the end of May, beginning of June, they really popped off and they carried that momentum all the way into the World Series. And this year the Jays started off slow again. And a lot of fans, I think myself and you included, were really frustrated at some of the results. But I noticed that it didn't seem like the clubhouse was panicking at all. And now the Jays, even with some injuries, have kind of fought their way back to 500. And it just appears to me that there might not be any sport where the vibes within the players matter as much as baseball, I guess, because it's such a long season. And you've seen some teams that from one month to the next look like absolutely different teams. So my question to you is baseball the sport where clubhouse vibes make the most difference to success in the long run?
I would argue absolutely, just because of the points that you've already mentioned. 162 game schedule. So that's essentially 6 months where you're playing every single day, right? They go out for batting practice, fielding practice, and then there's a game. There's really not much in the way of anything other than a game each and every day, right? So that clubhouse dynamic is vital. They're with each other all the time, right? So there has to be, I think, for the more successful teams, a dynamic of depth where you've got everyone who clearly knows their role, and then also a leadership presence. And the teams that have a mix of those two things are the ones that I think end up lasting over 162 game grind and going deep into the playoffs. Now, in baseball, 40% of the teams make the playoffs in some capacity, right? So, I mean, those are pretty good odds. So if a team can hover around 500, which the Jays have been doing, then it really doesn't take much to move into that that spot where they're talking about the playoffs, right? I mean, if the season were to end today, the Jays would have that American League wildcard spot,
Right. Yeah.
despite how poorly we thought they've played. And you're right, like there hasn't been much panic, and I think that is a testament to the leadership in the clubhouse. I mean, you've got guys that are on track for a Hall of Fame ticket, first ballot in some cases, right? Like Max Scherzer. George Springer will be in the conversation for the Hall of Fame. And these are guys that have won World Series, right? So nothing is going to phase them. Nothing's going to phase them. Mm-hmm. So in order to make a deep run and have a club that is cohesive, I think you have to have sort of a sprinkle of those guys who have been there, who have absolutely won at the highest level. If you don't have that and you're just stacking the team with what you perceive to be awesome talent, and you jack up the payroll like the New York Mets have done, and you don't have that leadership presence, you're going to run into problems. It's inevitable that they're going to have problems. Like if you look at the Mets, there's not really anyone in that clubhouse that has World Series pedigree. Like they've got superstars. There's no doubt about that. They've got Juan Soto, Lindor, Freddie Peralta, a cast of all-stars, perennial all-stars. But they don't have those guys who have been there, who despite if they don't play, they don't have to play every day. They don't really have to play at all, but they have to be involved in the discourse and involved in the conversation.
Right. I noticed.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure if you had mentioned manager in your list of things that were important, but how much does a manager's demeanor go into this, do you think?
Yeah, I think if you've got a club that has the level of experience and the depth that the Jays have, I think the manager, the most important role that he has is just managing the personalities, right? So ensuring that, everybody has a voice, everybody's feeling heard in the clubhouse, no one's feeling isolated. I think John Schneider does an excellent job of that for the Blue Jays. I think he's interactive with everyone on the team, has regular conversations with everyone on the team. And by comparison, like I'm thinking in 92, when I worked for the Blue Jays, I mean, they had an absolute all-star team of, guys that had been there for a while and superstar free agent signings like Jack Morris and Dave Winfield. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, in 92, Jack Morris and Dave Stieb, who were arguably the two best pitchers in the American League at the time, those guys did not like each other at all. Like they were deep rivals, with Morris in Detroit.
Yeah. Steve in the Athletics, right?
Well, no,
Steve was the Jays. Sorry, I'm thinking
Steve was. Yeah. Steve's probably the best player or the best pitcher that the Jays have ever had. Like he and I guess Roy Halladay, an argument can be made for him as well. Mm-hmm. But those two guys, they hated each other, and even when Morris was acquired, you could see that tension was still there, mm-hmm. right? And that could have created a wedge in the team, and that could have permeated throughout the clubhouse, and there could have been problems. But Cito Gaston was a master of managing egos, right? Yeah. So if he saw that an ego was getting too inflated, he would intervene. He'd get right in the player's face if need be.
Oh,
and really
that's good insight. I didn't know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know Cito Gaston was like that. That's good insight, because from what I had heard, he was just very calm and not really the best manager when it came to getting the most out of lesser talent. But his reputation, from what we hear in Toronto, is that he was really good at sort of getting all of those superstars to see it one way.
Yeah, he was, absolutely. But if, like I said, if a guy's ego got too inflated, I mean, Cito was a big guy. He was about 6'4", maybe 230. He was an imposing presence, intimidating presence when he stood up and looked you right in the eye. Like he commanded respect. He was one of those guys that really didn't have to say a lot.
Yeah.
But when a hard conversation was needed, he would get right in there and have it right away. Right. Now there's also, leaders in the clubhouse that would have like a king's court and they would lead team meetings, usually with the doors closed, and the clubhouse staff wouldn't be allowed in those meetings. But you could sort of hear or generally sense that there was some yelling, there was some shouting going on, but guys were given the opportunity to completely air out their concerns, right? So as long as the environment, there's a flow of constant communication and guys aren't feeling isolated, guys aren't feeling awkward, and guys are given a forum if they need it to really air out their concerns, then I think a team's talent is truly going to rise to the surface, and the team will play to the full potential. If there's a top-down approach where it's, my way or the highway, it's difficult to find success with guys like that. And I can cite plenty of examples where managers have come in with young teams and try and assert their presence with their resume or their level of experience, and backfires. They might, with today's playoff format sort of just get into the playoffs, but they won't go deep into the playoffs with that format if it's my way or the highway. I don't want to name names, but there's several managers who have had that approach, and they've sort of been nomadic or kind of transient throughout their careers because they don't last very long. They might get hired because an ownership group might feel someone needs to come in and lay down the law, but they don't last very long because they just don't win with that approach, right?
Right on. Well, I'm thinking of one example that maybe you can speak of a little bit in terms of clubhouse vibes versus some teams just getting lucky. A lot of people were accusing the Jays of just getting really, really lucky last year and going on this run. But, this year we could see that it's maybe not the case. Even though they've had some bad luck, they're still a really good team. I'm thinking of a team like the Boston Red Sox from a couple years ago when they won the title. I believe it was Valentine was the manager.
It would have been Alex Cora, he's been
before
fired.
Cora. It was when they won a title, and then they were absolutely brutal the year after.
Well, there was
wasn't it Bobby Valentine? Was that his name?
No, it wasn't Bobby Valentine. They had John Farrell for one, who had also managed in Toronto.
Yes.
And then Tito. Why can't I think of Tito's name? Who's now managing Cleveland?
Francona.
Tito Francona, of course.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
So they went from Francona in 2004 when they won to John Farrell in 2007 when they won, and then Cora in 2018 when they won.
But I seem to remember those Red Sox teams bouncing from being last in the division to winning the World Series. Like they did.
Right. But with this playoff format, that's the way it can happen, right?
So do you think that's more luck, or do you think that's the vibes coming into play? Like, what do you think is an account there for teams looking so different from one season to the next?
I think it's definitely the vibe, and you can see that the Red Sox are imploding this year. The Chicago Cubs are completely imploding, which is surprising given the leadership presence that they have. They brought in guys who are great players. They've got Dansby Swanson and Alex Bregman on the left side of the infield.
Yeah.
But just recently you had PCA with Pete Crow Armstrong, who had a brutal exchange with a fan that went viral on social media. And the fallout from that has been the Cubs, they can't win. They just can't find any cohesion within that clubhouse. It's just not working on any level, which leads me to believe that there's just an immaturity problem that I think they probably tried to address it, but the management, I think it's Craig Counsell, who's in Chicago. He just has not been able to steer that ship.
Right.
And the players that they brought on who are supposed to lead maybe aren't really leaders. Maybe they're not the ones. They're great players, Bregman, Swanson, but maybe they're not guys who can lead a King's Court in the clubhouse and get everybody on the same page, because that's absolutely imperative to get a team, moving towards the playoffs and carrying that momentum, like you said. But I will say with the Jays last year, in terms of luck, they won 94 games and they won the division, right? So 94 games, that's a division winning season. So yeah, they had their bouts of uncertainty early in the season, but they picked it up. And I think when you got guys like Max Scherzer, George Springer in the clubhouse who are having an impact
Mm-hmm.
and having regular conversations with guys, that was an amazing year that they had last year. And they did have great momentum going into the playoffs for sure, which certainly helped. But I think that team really clicked last year,
Mm-hmm.
really did. And hopefully they're moving towards the same sort of direction this year with this club.
Well, thankfully for us, the American League hasn't ran away with it. I mean, several other teams struggling.
Yeah, the National League is clearly better than
Right.
the American League, no question about it.
Right.
And I would argue that the Atlanta Braves right now are, I think, the best team, even better than the Dodgers. I'll get some argument with that, but I think the Braves are just a stacked team with no weaknesses that I can see.
Right. Well, even the Mariners last year, they looked much more formidable than they do this year. You know.
Oh yeah,
So
100%.
Same guys around, same major players for that team, but yeah, just in terms of this cohesion and this clubhouse vibe, maybe not the same.
Yeah.
Nice to see that they didn't fire their managers like the Red Sox did, that they didn't have to, but maybe we'll get a firing on the Mets side or something like that sometime soon.
It is crazy. I mean, how do you justify firing these managers, right? When they've had, the World Series pedigree, they've clearly won in the past. They know how to win with the right system in place. How do you just decide one day, you know what, it's time to move on from this guy? Because I think that's just throwing in the towel. I think Boston has really thrown in the towel on this season. I guess somebody's got to take the fall, and the most obvious and first choice is always the manager.
Yeah.
But when they've proven that they can win in that city with that system, it just seems to me to be a bit too much of a knee-jerk reaction.
Right. Well, there's an old adage that applies to every sport. It's a lot easier to fire the manager than all the players, right?
It's true.
So yeah, when you
wasn't the coach of the year, who was it? What's Boston's coach's name? The Celtics coach who won Coach of the Year?
Oh, Missoula.
Missoula, yeah, and he had been ridiculing and openly poking fun at the Coach of the Year award and saying how meaningless it was, and then he wins it.
Yeah, then he doesn't think it's so meaningless.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've seen a lot of coaches. We can ask them how they feel. Dwayne Casey comes to mind, but
yeah,
right on. Okay.
Anyway, yeah, good chat. I like the open-ended format. Sometimes I'll ramble on a bit too much, but there is a lot of information that you want to convey, and so many memories come to mind, right? And stories that I want to tell and want to share, but we've only got a limited time slot today.
Yeah, well, rambling is why we're here, I guess. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, as Bob Seger said, ramble on,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I hopefully we'll have a lot more next week with the finals coming up, and it's more entertaining baseball. So.
Yeah, what do you got in store today? It's a nice day here in Toronto.
Oh yeah, no, just gonna maybe try and get caught up on some of the NBA clips that have happened. I might do a deeper dive into some of those games just to see if I really feel in line with social media that the refereeing was biased in those games. Probably a little bit, but might do a deeper dive and then just enjoy the day. So, you got anything you want to tell people before we head out?
Yeah, actually, on the Slam Scarborough on Substack, I just posted yesterday a response in an interview that I had with Dr. Peter Greger, a renowned cardiologist, and he digs into the effects of sugar. And the article is focusing in on the evolution of the sport drink and high fructose corn syrup, and how the sports industry has kind of been manipulated into believing that these sugary drinks are, the right choice in, the heat of competition. Is it a great choice? Well, I'll leave it up to you to decide. Check out the article that is the evolution of the sport drink, and that's on the Slam Scarborough, with some direct quotes and interview references from Dr. Peter Greger himself. So that's kind of cool.
Right on. Good stuff as always.
Yeah, man. All right. We'll talk soon. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Right on.
Bye.
Take care.